Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Grounds College Character Creation 101 tutorial for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. When you first load up Fantasy Grounds, you're going to get to this launch screen. Depending on if you're using the demo version or the one of the paid versions, these buttons over here might be slightly different, but most of the stuff we're going to go through today will work regardless of which client you're using. You can create your own campaign or load a campaign and go in as the Dungeon Master and create characters that way. Most of the stuff, whether you do it that way or you do it the way that we're going to do it today, which is through joining a game, will work basically the same. But today we want to cover the most standard way of creating a character, which is logging into the server of whoever is going to be the GM or DM of the game, whoever's hosting it, and building your character over there. So the way that you do that is the first thing you need to do is join their game, and you do that by clicking on this button that says Join Game, surprisingly enough. So you click Join Game, and you come to this page that says, username, host address, and it gives you these little pinked out fields to put in your information. So I am going to give my username as Colin, because that is my name, Colin. Pleased to meet you. And on host address, this is normally where you would put what is called the alias. You can use the direct IP address method for logging in. However, sharing that kind of stuff publicly can be a little bit dangerous. So usually we use an alias that is provided by the Fantasy Grounds servers to mask that IP address. And it always follows a pretty specific set of rules. It's four words that will be like adjective, noun, adjective, noun. So you'll get like, cunning, ogre, dastardly dice or something like that. Some combination of terms like that. However, in this case, I will be logging into an instance of Fantasy Grounds that is running as the DM on the same computer that I'm running this instance that we're recording right now. So in this host address, I will put in local host, right? And you only use this when you're logging into one of your own instances running on the same computer. And then the first thing you'll do is click the start button, and it will ask you to put in a password if a password has been set for the campaign that you're logging into. And in this case, the password I set up is CC101 for Character Creation 101. And then you click Start again, and it will start to load up. Depending on connection speed and how much CPU power you have and all those kinds of things, this can take various amounts of time. So I'm just going to pause here, and we will get back to this once we load up to the desktop. Okay, so here we are at the desktop of Fantasy Grounds when you first load up into the D&D 5e rules set. And as you can see, there's this campaign setup window that pops up. And on this first page, you've got your user manual, wiki user guides, and forum links. Clicking on these will bring you to those websites, and I highly recommend checking those out when you've got the time, because there's a lot of really great information in there. A lot of the stuff we're going to cover today is spelled out, pretty in depth on in these websites and stuff. And the forums are a great place to ask for advice and things like that. So, when you get the chance, please, check those out. The rest of the pages in this wizard are kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, so we're just going to close this out. And if you're following along, in a separate window running Fantasy Grounds, which I highly recommend because it's always easier to remember stuff if you've done it once. You'll get to this. You'll have this character selection screen, up if you've logged in as a client. But for now, just go ahead and close that out, because I would like to talk to you a little bit about what's going on under the hood of Fantasy Grounds, kind of behind the scenes. So in order to do that, the first thing I'd like you guys to check out is this library button down here at the bottom. This is a really, really important part of how Fantasy Grounds works. Because, Fantasy Grounds isn't a game. What Fantasy Grounds is a piece of bookkeeping software, really, really powerful bookkeeping software that is designed specifically to help us run role-playing games. The games we're playing in this case, it's D&D 5e, but it could be Pathfinder, or Savage Worlds, or Fate, or Call of Cthulhu, or even Shadowrun, or West End Game Star Wars, or Lady Blackbird, or Burning Wheel, whatever. All of those games are playable using Fantasy Grounds, whether they're licensed products which are supplied and they help build the rule sets, or their community rule sets that have been custom built by the community. But for now we're playing D&D 5e. So when you open up this library window, you'll notice it has these like GM play and create PC and all buttons. What those do is they change these buttons along the right hand side here. Depending on what it is you're doing. If you're running as the GM and you click this, you're going to get a bunch of buttons that help you run a game. If you're a player, you get different buttons that the kind of thing players want to look at. But today we're creating a PC, so you're going to want to click this Create PC button, which gives you all of the stuff that you need to build a PC. And you can customize this a little bit in this top window by, like, for example, if you want to add notes, you can click this little circle and put a check in there, and then all of a sudden the notes button pops up, and then you can like turn it off here in the same way. Now the next most important thing in here is this modules button. If you click on that, you get to the data module activation window. And depending on what the game master has made available to players, there could be lots of different things in here. If they have the Sword Coast Adventures Guide or whatever, they could have made that available to players, and then it would be in here and you could load that up. In this case, in order to keep things simple, I've just added the Player's Handbook Deluxe, which, online it's usually referred to as like the, core class packs, but basically it's just the PHP. And you're going to want to load this up, so you go ahead and click this button that says Load. And at this point, the game will quite often lag out a little bit as the player's handbook is being loaded up into the client from the server. SmiteWorks can't just allow people to share the player's handbook willy-nilly for copyright reasons. Wizards of the Coast isn't going to allow them to do that. So every time you load this up from the server, they're going to have to download it to your computer. If you've already got it yourself, it might speed that up a little bit, but basically that's just what happens. And once you've got that loaded up, you can close this out, and you'll see down here in this left-hand cell now you have Core Rules Player's Handbook Deluxe. If you click on that, you get tables, backgrounds, classes, equipment, and all of these different things. You can go in here and see the different classes that are in the PHP, and the different races and things like that. But the most important thing in this window, I think, is this reference manual. If you click on that, it opens up this reference window, and you can open it up over here and say, for example, click on character creation, since that's what we're doing. And you'll see you get all of the art and all of the layout and all of the information that is in the player's handbook. And this is a great way of just flipping through the book as if you were sitting at a friend's table, at his tabletop, and he just says, oh, yeah, I've got a copy of the PHP, go ahead and look at it. And it's really good for, like, if you remember that, like, in the appendices, that's where they handle, conditions. So I'm going to come down here, and it's like, oh, how does charmed work? How does, frightened work? It's like all that information will be in here. And so it's just a really good way of organizing that information and making it a lot more similar to, reading a physical copy of the book, if you have it, as you would if it was available at your friend's house when you went there to play D&D. But for now, we can close that out since we're not going to be really using this stuff that much. Instead, we're going to be using these buttons on the right-hand side here. So the first thing that we want to do is go back into the character selection window, and you do that by clicking on this PC button up on the right. And you'll see there are no characters in here. What you're going to want to do is add one, and you use this Add Item button, this little green cross that appears here down in the middle at the bottom. You click that, and you notice all of a sudden there's this unnamed square up here on the top left. If you click on that, it opens up the character sheet. This is essentially a blank character sheet. I recommend the first thing that you do is click up here and give it a name. I'm going to name this character Nori. Nori is going to be a Dwarven Cleric, Hill Dwarf Cleric of the Life Domain, and he is based very much on the character sheet description on the Fantasy Grounds Wiki, because most of the stuff in here, pretty much all of it, maybe even, is available using the SRD data. So if you're only following along and you don't have access to the Player's Handbook and you have the SRD, then you should be able to still follow along and build this character. Okay, so when you're building a character, there's a specific order that the Player's Handbook and Fantasy Grounds expects you to take. And there are mechanical reasons for doing it this way. Fantasy Grounds expects you to do it in this order because if you do things out of order, it can kind of mess up some of the automation, and your stats might get a little bit wonky if you do this out of order. And the way I like to remember that order is to think of this as the same basic way that an organism develops in nature. I have a friend who continually, gives me a little crap because, she busts my chops over a little bit, saying that, this is absolutely not the way that organisms develop in nature, but it does help me remember it. And the way that I remember it is by looking at it like abilities and stats are like your DNA, your genetics, and every creature in the game, whether it's a fungus, or an elf, or a dragon, or a god, or whatever, they all have stats. So that's the first thing you want to put in. The next thing that comes up is race, and because you're born, right? So first you get your genetics, and then you're born, and you get your race, and then you grow up, and you get your background, and then you get your job, which is your class. And that just helps me keep track of the proper order of doing it this way. And yeah, if you do it out of order, Fantasy Grounds can get a little bit weird. So I highly recommend doing it in this order. So when it comes to choosing stats in 5e, there are three main ways of doing it. It's the standard classic roll the dice and see what you get. But in things like Adventures League and the Explorers Guild on Fantasy Grounds College and things like that, we choose to use the point buy or the stat spread system, because technically the point buy system and the stat spread system are the same thing. You can get the stat spread stats using the point buy system, which is it's in the Player's Handbook, and basically it's with point buy you've got 27 points to buy stats, and different amounts cost, or different stats cost different amounts. But today we're just going to be using the standard, stat spread, because it's pretty simple and it generally works for most characters. So this character is going to be a cleric, and that's really the first thing you want to do is kind of decide what kind of character you want to make. So this guy's going to be a cleric, and for clerics, one of the most important stats is wisdom, since that's their primary spell casting stat. So in order to change a stat from the base 10 that it starts at, you just move the mouse over the cell and click once, and then type in the number you want. So for the stat spread, from in a descending order, it goes 15. So I'm going to give him a wisdom of 15, and then the next and most important thing for him, I think, is going to be strength. So I'm going to give him a 14 there. And then, Constitution is important for, getting extra hit points and resisting, certain kinds of effects, like poison. And so you want to click on that and type 13, 13. And then Dexterity is always good, kind of can help you avoid damage sometimes. Intelligence is good for, things like history checks and religion checks and stuff like that. So I'm going to leave that at 10. And he doesn't really need to have all that much charisma, so I'm going to give him an 8 for that. He can be a little bit gruff. So now we've got his stats. They're all like plugged in there. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is give him his race. So the race button is over here on right about in the middle on the right hand side, and you click races, and it opens up, and you've got your dragonborn, dwarves, elves, humans, all these different things. And this guy's going to be a dwarf, so go ahead and click on dwarf, and then you can close that out to keep your screen from being too cluttered. Expand it a little bit, and this window will give you a lot of information about the race that you're trying to choose, or you're considering choosing. Things like how they feel about clans, and they're slow to trust and whatnot, and even like general dwarf names, so you can help choose a dwarf name. And then down here you get the dwarf traits, and these things, these links, directly affect how you're going to build your character. And at this point, I like to point out that all the character sheet really is a shell, a container for holding links. And the way you build it is by dragging those links from these classes and backgrounds and things, which are ultimately coming from those modules that I opened up in the library, and then just dropping them onto the character sheet. So the first thing that we're going to choose is his race, which is dwarf. And if you click on the ability score increase, it says, your constitution score increases by 2. So right off the bat, his constitution is going to go up from 13 to 15. But also, dwarves have sub-races. So if you click on this sub-race button down here, you see you have hill dwarf and mountain dwarf. Because hill dwarves give an ability score bonus to wisdom of 1, and wisdom is a really important score for a cleric, that's what we're going to choose. So I go ahead and just close this out, and then grab Hilldorf and drop it up here into race, and drop that link directly onto it, right? And as you can see in the chat window now, all of these different traits and abilities and languages and things that go along with being a Hilldorf have been applied to the character sheet. At that point, you can just close out the subrace and the Dwarven racial window. So the next thing that you get when you're building your character is your background. So you've got your genetics, and your character's been born, and now he grows up. So the background button is up here, just underneath the PC button, and you click on that, and we're going to give him the acolyte background. So he grew up as an acolyte, and that led him towards being a cleric. And if you open this up and scroll down a little bit, you see that he gets skill proficiencies from this background. From pretty much all backgrounds grant some skills. And in this case, he gets insight and religion. And it's kind of important to remember that here. It's going to come up real quick. But he also gets languages, 2 of his choice, or your choice, and equipment, which we will get to a little bit later. So the way that you apply this is exactly the same. You grab this little link, and these little brown shields here I'm calling links. If you're using a different skin, if you're using the Wizards of the Coast skin or something like that, they might appear as red dragon heads or whatever the skin happens to be. But in this basic default skin, they look like these little wooden, little brown shields. So go ahead and grab that and drag it over and drop it into the background section, and now you can see that the skill insight and skill religion have been added to this character. Also, there's this feature, shelter of the faithful, and these personality traits and things like that, which we will get to in a little bit. So now, he's got his genetics, he's been born, he's grown up, and we want to give him his class. So you just do the same thing, click on class, navigate to cleric. If you open this up, it gives you another window with a bunch of information, about clerics, and down here at the very bottom of this, there's information on teachers and equipment and all your spell tables and advancement tables and things like that. And so this becomes a pretty important window to be looking at when you're building your character later on. But for now, all we have to do is grab this link right here, drag it up to class and level, let go of it, and boom, you get cleric. But now you also get this select skills dialog that pops up, and you're allowed to choose 2 skills from the list below in which your character will be proficient. Now, On the right-hand side of your character sheet, you've got these different tabs that give you, more in-depth information on what's going on in this character, right? So if you click on the Skills tab, you'll notice that Insight and Religion have these little yellow stars next to them, and that's because when we chose the background, those were the two skills that we got. So we don't want to choose Insight or Religion over here because we already have them. And Fantasy Grounds isn't going to apply those twice. That's not how 5e works. So you don't want to choose those two. If you choose those two, they just won't get applied. You'll essentially just lose a potential skill. So you want to choose something else. Because this guy's a cleric and he's going to be a healer, I want to choose medicine. And then he's not real charismatic, so he's not all about persuading people, but maybe he's got a pretty good grasp of history. So I'm going to go ahead and click history, and then click this check mark here that will then apply that to the character sheet, and you can see that history and medicine have now become proficient, and he can apply his proficiency bonus to that, which we'll get into in a little bit. Now the next choice that I get to make is what domain this cleric is going to be. Because he's going to be the healer of the party, I'm going to give him the life domain, since that's where you get a lot of the skills or abilities that help you heal. And if you want more information on that, whenever you see these links, you can go ahead and click on that, and it will explain, the life domain spells and what these guys are all about, which is always good information to have when you're making decisions. And you can go ahead and just click life domain and click check. And now that has been added to this character. And if you come over here and you look in the chat window, you can see that all sorts of different things have been added to him. So this has been keeping track of everything that's been going on this character as we've been building him. So now you've got you've got your stats, you've got your race, you've got your background, you've got your class. And we are ready to move on to your inventory. So if you click on the inventory tab here on the right hand side of the character sheet, you see that he's got nothing in here, right? Well, if we click on classes and click on cleric again, close that out, move this somewhere where you can kind of see it, and then scroll down to equipment down here right near the bottom, you can see you got a lot of choices. For example, the first choice is you get to choose A, a mace, or B, a warhammer if proficient. Now, because he got the Dwarven combat training trait when we added the Hill Dwarf race to him, you click on that, it says you have proficiency with the battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. So warhammers are pretty good. So I'm going to choose that. And right here in the class dialog, there's this link to the weapon list. Now you can also get to this by clicking on items and clicking on weapons, or even just searching in here in this this little tab here, and you can filter it out from weapons and adventuring gears and different kinds of things like that. And that's a great way to get to items. But since they've gone ahead and provided us this weapon list link right here, just click on that. And we're looking for the warhammer, right? So I'm going to click on the inventory tab again, scroll down to the warhammer. Let's see if I can find it here. Warhammer. And then just grab this and drag it over here to equipment and let go, and it says warhammer. Now he's been given a warhammer. And you can close that out and then look at the next thing that he gets, which is scale mail, leather armor, or chainmail if proficient. And I believe he is proficient in chainmail. So that's combat training armor. Let's see here: armor, light armor, medium armor, and shields. Okay, so if you click on the armor list and you look down here under medium armor, chain shirt is in there. Oh, I'm sorry, but this is chain mail. So it's not, he doesn't get chain mail. He'll get scale mail, I believe. Yes, scale mail. Because scale mail is medium armor. So scroll over here and grab this scale mail and drag it over and drop it on the character sheet. So now he has his scale mail armor. And then if you, oh, I've already closed out classes, so let's just open that up again, and then scroll back down, and we get to his next set of options, which are a light crossbow and 20 bolts or any simple weapon. It's always nice to have range, so again, open it up, look for crossbow light, drop it in here. And then he gets 20 crossbow bolts, which we can get from his adventuring gear option. So if you click on adventuring gear link, this is where you have your ammunition and stuff, and you can see crossbow bolts 20. You can drag that over and drop it off, and so now that's in there. The next thing is a priest pack or an explorer's pack, shield, and holy symbol. Well, I would like him to have a shield and a holy symbol, even though he'll get a holy symbol from his background, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I definitely want him to have a shield. So I'm going to click on the Adventuring Gears link again, scroll down to Equipment Packs, and grab the Explorer's Pack and drop it in here, and you see this really cool stuff happens because it populates this whole list with all of the things that come in an Explorer's Pack. If you click on it, it'll tell you that it comes with these different things, and it just goes ahead and it pops all that stuff in there for you automatically, which is really nice. And then also you can get a shield and a holy symbol. So I would like to choose a holy symbol, which is, where is that? Holy symbol. And I'm just going to choose an emblem, because I would like that emblem to be installed onto his shield, which is a pretty standard thing for cleric. So I'm going to give him his emblem. And then close this out, and then click on the armor list. Down here you find shield, and drag that over, and now he's got a shield. Close that out, and that's basically it for the equipment that he gets for being a cleric. There's some other equipment that you get for your background. So if we come in here and click on Acolyte, you see he can get a holy symbol, which you already have, a prayer book or a prayer wheel, 6 sticks of incense, vestments, a set of common clothes, and a belt pouch containing 15 gold pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here and type in 15, and then click here and type GP. So now he's got his 15 gold pieces. And for the other things now, some of the stuff you can find in the items tab. So let's go over there, and I'm just going to kind of clear this out a little bit so we've got more room to work with. So move this guy over here, close that out, and then click on the items list and move it over here. And let's see here. So the first thing, let's just look for clothes, because everyone wants some of those, right? Clothes. So I type in just the first couple of letters that I need, and it comes through here, and it has these clothes, travelers, these kinds of things. And if you look in here, it says a set of common clothes. So clothes, common. Drag that over. It also says vestments. So clothes, vestments. Drop those over here. And then belt patch, we already got 5 sticks of incense and those kinds of things. So let's come back here and say prayer. All right, so this is one of those things that is not in there, right? So you can come in here and you can right click and click create item and type in prayer book. Did I spell that right? Prayer book. So now he's got his prayer book in there, and that kind of thing. And a lot of the stuff that you can customize and put in there whenever you want, just so that you know that you've got it. Now, when you look in this inventory page, you'll notice that you've got your items, you've got their weight, you've got these little circles, and then your links that explain like what it is, crossbow bolts, whatever. And some of them, right, they have this little thing. It looks, I always think it looks like a little fat bunny rabbit, but it's supposed to be a pouch, and it just says you're carrying it, right? So, if you're going to leave your bedroll and some of your stuff at the inn or outside of your camp, you can just, click on that until it's not carried. But then some of these other ones have this little button, looks like a t-shirt, and that means it's equipped. And that's important for a little bit later on when we work on the actions tab, because it will show you, the weapons that you have equipped. And on your main tab, your armor class, like as you can see, his armor class has gone up because he has his armor equipped. So that's your inventory. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is go back to your main tab and start looking through some of this stuff with a little bit more critical eye. For example, your armor class. Now, as I mentioned just a minute ago, your armor class has gone up because of your because of this character's armor that has been applied. Now, if you click on this little magnifying button right there, and you'll see these magnifying glasses like all around. For example, where it says Cleric 1, you can click on this and it will open up your class level dialog box. And for example, in here it says total level, XP, and next level. Well, getting to second level requires 300 XP, so you can type that in there. And this is just for keeping track of how much XP you have and how much you need to get to the next level. This doesn't really automate, because the game, I should say the software doesn't know what your next class is going to be, so it doesn't want to apply something automatically, because you might want to choose the multi-class or something like that. But it's a good way of just keeping track of how much you have and how much you need. And then in this, combat calc dialog box, which opens up when you click this button here, this magnifying glass next to armor class, you can see that your base armor class is 10. You get 4 from your armor. You also have a shield, and you're allowed to use dexterity of up to 2 points, which we've got 1 here. So it adds all of that together, and it gives you your armor class of 17. The other stuff on this page that you kind of want to look at is your constitution saves, or not your constitution saves, your saving throws over here on the right-hand side. Your saving throws are based on your stat bonuses that you get from your stats over here, but some of them are going to be proficient, which means you get to add your proficiency bonus to them, which is logged up here, right? So at first level, it's a +2, and as you go up in level, that will go up, and so these things will get you'll get better and better at doing these things, and you'll get better and better at using any skills that are proficient, because you get to add that bonus to it. And this is where you find that information, and this is also where you roll those things, right? So for example, if you're asked to roll a strength check, you'll notice that there's this little 20-sided die right next to your strength, and the same thing on your saving throws. There's all these little 20-sided die represented here with an icon. If the field that you're looking at is something where you can put information into it, and it has this little icon, then that is a button you want to double click on in order to make that roll. So for example, if somebody asked me to make a strength check, I could come over here and I could double click that, and the game will automatically roll this die, and then I rolled an 11, I get a +2 from the +2 strength bonus here for a total of 13. If someone said to make a strength saving throw, or let's say a wisdom saving throw, because the wisdom bonus is +3, but since it's proficient, it's total +5, you do it over here. And then it rolls the die, and then you get to take that 19, add 5, and get a 24, which is a pretty nice roll. So that's one way of rolling these dice. And right here in the middle, one of the most important die rolls that you're going to have is your initiative, which is how D&D 5e and pretty much all Dungeons and Dragons versions keep track of who goes first in combat, who gets to move quickest. And this is where your initiative roll is. Now, one thing that I can highly recommend is taking this initiative die and clicking and holding on it and then dragging off. And you can do this pretty much anywhere where there is a 20-sided die icon, and you can pick it up and you can take it in your hand, and now you can just roll it, and that'll roll his initiative, right? Or you can click it and hold it and drag it off and drop it into one of these slots down across the bottom that are numbered. These are hot slots. I like to put mine in 12. You can put it wherever you want, but I like to put mine over there. And then once it's in a hot slot, it becomes a button. And with a button, you don't have to double click it. You only have to click it a single time, and it will roll it. Also, since this is in the number 12 hot slot, all you have to do is hit the F12 button, and it will roll it. And that works for all of these. And you can put pretty much any die roll into these slots. The important thing to remember is, for example, if you add a 2-hit die, or a damage, die in, damage roll into one of these things, and that number changes on your character sheet because you level up or someone casts a spell on you that increases those numbers. It's not gonna reflect it in here. Whatever you put in there, once you put it in there, that's what gets locked in. And if those numbers change later, you'll have to drag them back down again later. So that's just something to remember. But as I said, these become buttons. Now there's also another button on this page that is the death saving throw button, which is really important. And with buttons, you only have to click them once. So for example, if I click this a single time, it will roll an 11, and it will roll the death saving throw for me. Now, since this guy isn't down to 0 hit points, it doesn't cover, add your successes and your failures. But that's something that we'll get into in Combat 101. So it's, again, a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial. But I just want to point out that buttons like this are single clicks, and cells like this are double clicks. Okay, so the next thing is your skills tab to drop down, and in your skills tab, you've got some things that are going to be rolled quite a bit. For example, perception. Perception skills are rolled a lot, and so I like to put this in slot 11 because it's right next to this little button here that's called the die tower, which is where you roll a die if you don't want, or if the dungeon master doesn't want you to know how well or how poorly you did. So for example, if I click this straight, it just rolls it and tells me what I rolled. Right, I rolled a 5 plus 3 for a total of 8. Well, if you're searching for a trap or something and you roll a 1, some DMs don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know how well you've done or how, whether or not you've succeeded or failed. So that's what this die tower is for. If the dungeon master has turned that on, what you can do is you can drag off of that and then just drop it into the die tower. And this time it says that I rolled it, and it tells me what I rolled, but it does not tell me the result. But over on the DM client, it tells me it'll say what it was, so the dungeon master can determine the outcome of that. So perception and stealth are two things that I can recommend putting in here and getting close to the die tower, because those are things that are often rolled into the die tower. So the next tab down here is your abilities. There are a lot of things in here that will come into play when you're building your actions. And it's good to know, it's good to know what those things are going to be. In this particular case, there's not that much stuff except for Dwarven Resilience. And yeah, Dwarven Resilience is pretty much the main thing for getting something into your Actions tab. The other stuff down here is Common, Dwarvish, and 2 languages of your choice. Now, if you're looking for languages, like here, it only has Common and Dwarvish loaded up because I don't have any of the language packs turned on. And this is going to matter a lot with, what setting your DM is using and what language packs he's using. And it's kind of cool because, if you have something set to be, for example, in Dwarvish, I can type in here Dwarvish. And if I type something like, hello world, and hit enter, it will say it in Dwarvish, and only people who speak Dwarvish will get the translation and know what you said. So you can say things to the party and keep that information amongst yourselves, which is a neat little bit of flavor. So, and then we already went through inventory, and so then you get down to the notes, which is where you can put your alignment, your, gender, age, height, weight, your size being medium. That's kind of important, and that's put in here automatically. And a lot of this stuff goes into how you want to build your character, which all of this is customizable. You're not forced to do anything for this because your character is your own. However, in the background, like for example, we have the Acolyte background. You can click in here and you can scroll down, and it has the suggested characteristics. So for example, you can click on this, and if you don't know what kind of character you want to make, you can just roll for it. You can just click on this button, because again, that's a button, so it's single click. and it, rolls a die, and it tells me you got a 2, which is I can find common ground between the fiercest enemies, empathizing with them, and always working towards peace. And there are these other, you know, uh, personality traits in here. So, um, I enjoyed fine food and drink, high society among my typical elite, rough living grates on me, nah. I quote him, second test, part of almost every situation. Nothing can take my optimistic attitude. I like that. So when it's text like this in a table, all you have to do is click and hold on it, and then you can drag it somewhere else and drop it on. And I can get that personality trait in there. Technically, you get 2 of them. So I'm going to do that. He's optimistic, and I can find common ground between the fiercest enemies, empathizing with them, and always working hard towards peace. So, really nice guy. And then come down here with the ideal and do the same kind of thing. Charity, I like that, charity. So he's a charitable guy, always tries to help those in need, gets that in there. Bonds, my life piece took me in, everything I do is for the common people. Again, I'm just making this guy like really stereotypical hero, so everything I do is for the common people. And then flaws. Now flaws are where things get really interesting for me, because this is where you get something where you can play your character in a way that maybe it doesn't always work out the best for him, but it can add a lot of flavor and a lot of fun to the game. Okay, so I like this one. My piety sometimes lead me to blindly trust those who profess faith in my God. So, he could be easily misled by somebody, from inside his own church, or somebody who just kind of even pretends to follow him. So I like that. An appearance and notes, that's all up to you. And again, all of this stuff is customizable. But getting that stuff in is really great because it gives your DM a way to, help build your character. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy lawful good, just because it kind of works. There's nothing wrong with making your standard hero type character. The log tab in here is only really used for Adventurers League, or in our other things like the Explorers Guild or the Dungeon Delvers Society. They might want you to use something in here to log your adventures and stuff like that. But for most players, this isn't going to be all that useful, so we can just go ahead and skip that. And then now we get down to the Actions tab, which is really the bread and butter of what character sheet is for in Fantasy Grounds. And there's a lot of stuff that we need to do in here. We're going to start at the top and cover his weapons. So you've got Crossbow Light and Warhammer here that we added to his inventory earlier. And as you can see to the right here, there's this 20-sided die button. It's a cell like before, so you're going to want to double click it, and it will roll it. And the same thing with the crossbow. And you've also got this damage cell, which again, it's got a bunch of information, so it's going to be a double click, and it will roll that damage and calculate all that stuff in here. You can see I was making a whole bunch of attack rolls here. And another thing you can do, another way to do this, is to grab this to hit die and drag it off and drop it into a hot slot. You can do the same thing with the damage. And then all you have to do is click it once and it will roll it, and click it once and it will roll the damage, or again, F1, F2 will do the same thing. But of course, this won't reflect any changes that happen to the character sheet. It will only ever roll what you put in there the first time when you first did it. So as you level up and as people cast spells on you that might change your to hits, you might not want to do it that way, which means you might want to just use the double clicks on the button itself. Now the next thing down here is your spell slots, and Fantasy Grounds does a really good job of keeping track of this and bumping them up as you level up. You can customize this just like everything else, and delete it and add it and do those kinds of things. But normally it's handled pretty well just automatically. And the next thing you have down here is your spells. Now, clerics get different kinds of spells. They get their domain spells, and then they get their cantrips, and then they get their spells that are based on their class level and things like that. So the first thing that we're going to want to look at is domain spells. So if you come up here and you click on the abilities tab, you will see that they have that they've got the this is where the life domain link is on this character sheet. If you click on that, it'll open up life domain, explain what it means, how it works, and the life domain spells. So bless, cure, and cure wounds for a first level character. So then if you come back down to the actions tab, there are multiple ways of getting these spells into the character sheet. You can just drag and drop them and then alter things around that way, or you can click the edit list, and you can add a new power and do it that way. The way that I like to do it is to just drag and drop. So I'm just going to grab this blast. I'm going to drop it in here, and it adds it to spells level 1. But because this is a domain spell, it works different than the spells that you have to prepare as a cleric, which we'll get into in a minute. So since this is in the display group down here, you've got this group option, this group cell here, and you can come in here and delete this and type domain spells. And then all you have to do is hit tab or click somewhere else, and it will create a new power category called domain spells, since you've added that. And then you can grab your cure wounds and drop it in here too. So now you've got this new power called domain spells. And the first thing you're going to want to do is come over to this magnifying glass. It's on just to the right of where it says domain spells, and click on that, and make sure that your ability is set to wisdom. And as I change this, you can see that this heal has been changing, because the amount of extra healing you get as a cleric changes based on your ability, and in this case it is +3 for your wisdom bonus. And then you want to go ahead and close that out. And so now this is giving you the correct number, because you've set this domain spell's power to be based on wisdom. Also, you see there's a lot of information in this, and it can get a little bit cluttered. So over here on these magnifying glasses, if you click on those, it'll minimize them and keep everything a lot clearer. But then your buttons for casting those spells go away. So what you want to do is come down to display, and where it says group, you click on that until it says actions, and that's where you get your buttons, or where you access these abilities. So for example, this little red cross, obviously a heal, and then this little guy looks like a zombie. I always think it looks like a zombie anyway. Is the effects ability, and when you cast bless, you apply effects to the people in your party, and that's how you do that. And so that's how you can get your domain spells into your character sheet in their own section, because the way that you prepare them works differently than with other spells. And then you can go ahead and close this out. But there are other things that go along with spellcasting as a cleric. So let's click on the abilities tab and come back here, and now you see down here there's a spellcasting feature with its link, and you click on that and scroll it up, and you get a lot of information about how spellcasting works for clerics, and a link to just the cleric spells. So as you can see, you've got your cantrips and level 1 spells, which for the time being, these are the only things we're going to be really all that concerned with. Don't need that window right now, so I'll go ahead and close it out, and we'll read about cantrips. So at first level, 3 cantrips of your choice from the cleric spell list. And you learn additional cantrips as you go up in level, but for now we just need to worry about 3 of them. So I'm going to come back to the Actions tab. I'm going to click the cleric spell button that's right there, just handily provided, and look through here through the cantrips. Because this guy is going to be kind of a healing type cleric, I'm going to give him things like, well, I am going to give him guidance. It's not really a healing thing, but it's a really useful cantrip, so I'm going to go ahead and give him the guidance spell, which, if I have it set to group, you can see that this is now says spells, but and now it says spells cantrips. And as you add different level spells, this will create new categories for that specific level of spell. So I'm also going to give him Sacred Flame, because it is a combat spell that can be pretty useful to cast as a cantrip. Um, because in fifth edition, in most D&D, cantrips don't cost spell slots. So as you can see, he only has 2 first level spells that he can cast before he takes a long rest, each day. But cantrips don't count against that, so you can cast these all the time. So Sacred Flame, it forces the person or the creature that you're casting it against to make a saving throw. And they have to get at least a 13. And the reason this is a 13 is because if you click on this magnifying glass, you can see that this ability is set to Wisdom, right? That means that your Wisdom bonus is being applied, which is +3. So the DC, which is the difficulty that the person you're casting it against, the creature you're casting it against, has to make in order to avoid this damage. And again, I can just minimize that to keep it a little bit cleaner. And then the other thing is, again, healer, so spare the dying, which means that if somebody gets knocked down to very, very few hit points, you can use spare the dying to stop them from bleeding to death, which is pretty useful. Now we get into level 1 spells, and things get a little bit more complicated here, because clerics, there are essentially two schools of thought, 2 ways of handling, keeping track of your spells in Fantasy Grounds for clerics specifically. And different spellcasters do this different ways. Technically, clerics have access to all of these spells, and all they have to do is decide which of these they would like to prepare in the morning when they're doing their morning prayers. And then throughout the day, they get to use those, a number of times based on how many spell slots they have of that level. One way of doing this is to simply drag every single one of these onto the character sheet and then use the preparation mode to go through and choose which ones you're going to prepare that day. And then only those ones will show up when you have the mode set to combat, so that you can focus on just the ones you have ready. That can get a little confusing. So what a lot of people will do is simply drag the spells over that they want to prepare for that day, and if they change their minds, then delete those off the character sheet and drag other ones over, or just drag them over as needed, just to keep things from getting a little too cluttered. In this particular case, the spells that we're going to choose, at the first level, are Command, Detect Magic, which is always pretty useful, Healing Word, there's Healing Word, and Shield of Faith. So this character currently can prepare 4 spells per day. So by having these 4 spells in here, and only those 4 spells in here, I don't really need to come in here and click and say that these spells are prepared. And this is where we would do it. So for example, if I also added something like Protection from Evil and Good, or Guiding Bolt, or what else? Bane. Those would all be in this list too, obviously, because I just added them. Keep this a little bit clearer. Just change this to actions, as you can see how those buttons look. But when I come into preparation, I can then say, well, I only want to have Command, Detect Magic, Healing Word, and Shield of Faith prepared, right? So then, if I have the mode set to standard, it'll tell me all of the spells that I have, and it'll just have a little star next to the ones I have prepared. And then these ones are, available in the morning if I want to, prepare those instead. And then you just come into preparation and you click this check box and you change that to the ones you want to have prepared. So technically I could grab all of these spells and pull them in there and only prepare the ones that that I want to use. or you can keep it cleaner, depending on how you want to do it. So for now, this is good enough, and we've got all of this character's spells set up, and we can start worrying about the next step, which is changing the weapons. So on this character sheet, he's got a Warhammer. Now, if you click on this button here, for Warhammer, it gives you a little bit of information about it. And one of the things it says is versatile 1d10. What that means is if you have a Warhammer and you want to use it two-handed, you can get a little bit extra damage out of it. So instead of doing 1d8 plus 2 bludgeoning damage, it would do 1d10. And the plus 2 comes from the strength bonus that this character has. So there are multiple ways of doing this. One way is to have your Dungeon Master create a new item that is called Warhammer Two-Handed, and then you can drag that into your inventory and give it a weight of 0, and equip it, and then it will show up here and that kind of thing. But another way of doing it as a player is to click on this Edit List button again. Open this up, and this time you want to click Add Weapon. If you come in here and you add weapon, you can type, for example, Warhammer, two-handed, right? Oops, made an equal, two-handed. Now, in this, you're going to get your to hit and your damage field here, but they're going to be blank. So you can click on the magnifying glass here, and in here, it gives you your Warhammer Two-Handed, the name of it, your attack, which is going to be your base stat, which is your strength for this kind of weapon, and your proficiency, which is set to proficient, which is great. And then your damage, but the damage is blank here, and you can see that in here it's not doing any damage. So we want to click Edit List again here, and click Add Item, and then you get this strange little field where you've got these grayed out dice. In this case, the Warhammer is going to be doing 1d10 damage. So the way to add this isn't to click in here and type it. It's to grab a 10-sided die and drag it over here and just drop it right into that field. Right now, because the stat is base, and the base, stat for Warhammer Strength, you're going to be getting your +2 to it. But then you're also going to want to add the damage type, which in this case is bludgeoning. So now you've got your bludgeoning damage in there. So if you hit something that is resistant to bludgeoning, it will automatically, handle that for you. And then you can click Stop Editing List and close this out, and now you've got your Warhammer Two-Handed in there. And for some reason, it gets this little carried, equipped thing there. I don't really know what that's for. I've never quite understood that. So what I will often do is, in order to make that go away, just click Add Another Weapon, and then it gets rid of that, and that little thing pops up to here, and then just delete it. And then now it's clean. It's cleaner that way. One thing you'll notice is that this does not have a link. If you click on this, it opens up your Warhammer link here. But this doesn't have one because all we've done is created kind of an empty weapon. If your Dungeon Master creates an item, makes it a weapon, and then you drag it in your inventory and stuff, then that should add to the link there. But that just gets a little bit weird. It's just something that I've learned to ignore. Now, the next thing, though, is that when you're using your Warhammer Two-Handed, you're not going to be using your shield for obvious reasons. So there are multiple ways of handling that. For example, if you're using your Warhammer Two-Handed and you're planning on doing it for a long time, you can just come into your main tab here, into your inventory tab here, and where it says shield, you can unequip it. And then if you come in here, your armor class will reflect that. That's a really nice way of handling it, and it's kind of the way that I prefer to do it. However, if you're planning on, pulling your shield out and putting it on and switching a lot in combat, another thing you can do is come in here and add an effect that will give you a minus to your to your armor class. We're gonna get into creating effects here in a little bit, but that specific one is a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial. So my recommendation is to just click on inventory. When you're not using your shield, that's what these buttons are for, and just say it's carried but not equipped, and then use your weapon two-handed that way. Okay, however, there are some effects that I do think that we should get into now, specifically because dwarves have abilities that you're gonna wanna have on all the time, and there are some really common things that come up with potions and stuff that I think that we should cover. So for now, I'm going to change this mode to actions. And then I'm going to change the display to actions and the mode to combat, so that you're only seeing the spells that are prepared, which is just a good way of looking at things. And then come back up here to the abilities tab. Now in here there is this trait that you'll get as a dwarf called Dwarven Resilience. Dwarven Resilience means you get advantage on saving throws against poison and have resistance against poison damage, which is explained in Chapter 9 of the Player's Handbook. Unfortunately, Fantasy Grounds is not yet able to distinguish between saving throws based on damage type. So that is something that kind of has to be done manually, or you can give yourself an effect that will give you a bonus against any saving throw that you're about to make for one saving throw. So when it comes time to make that saving throw, you can give yourself advantage on it. And for those who don't know, advantage means that for an attack or something like that, like you can click this little button down here that says advantage is one way of doing it. And then if you make an attack or something like that, you roll two 20-sided die, and two 20-sided dice, I should say, and you keep the higher of the two. So because dwarves get advantage on those saving throws, it's nice to have something that allows you to do that automatically. And of course, always having resistance against poison is also really nice. So this is something that can be coded automatically. Coded manually, I should say. By creating a new power, for example, and naming it, for example, racial abilities. And oops. And when you do that, you get your racial abilities section, and you can put in here, you can right click on this, and click add action, and add effect, and then come in here and then add the syntax, or I'm sorry, come in here and add the syntax for what that effect does. But effects can be very complicated. There's a lot of syntax involved. There's a lot of coding involved. I shouldn't say a lot, but there's some. So one really good way of doing this is to use a third-party product that I like to promote, because it's really useful. It's created by a friend of the Fantasy Grounds College named Rob2E. It is a purchase, but I highly recommend getting it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the Dungeon Master's client that I'm running, and go into the library over here and make the module for the class features that he has made available. Or actually, I suppose in this case it will be the racial coding that he has, and then make it available to the players. So now that I have done that over here on the Dungeon Master screen, I can come back over to the player screen here, and come back into the library. And now when I go into modules, you see there are these two new modules, right? So leave the class features for now and just click load for the race trait effects coding, and close this all out. And now if I, well, there's two ways to get to it. So in here I can click race trace and then spells. He has these set up as spells, which is a pretty handy way of doing it. and then come down here, and you see Dwarven Resistance, which is what we're talking about right now. Now, if I click this, it says the same thing. You have advantage on saving throws against poison and all that stuff. It's got all that information in there. Now, all I have to do is grab this and drag it over to this new racial ability section and drop it in there, and it gives me this Dwarven Resilience, right? Now, if you look at this, it's got, oops, I'm sorry, it's got the same exact dialogue, right? So I could just basically, if you know this coding, you can copy it in, and you can put it in. If I just knew this off the top of my head or whatever, if you learn coding well enough, you can just type that out, and then you can have the target be self. You want to change that here, and when it expends, that means when does this run out, and it would be never, because this is something that you have on all the time. And then I could just name this the same thing. I could just name this Dwarven Resilience. And so, as you can see, this stuff can all be done manually. However, the reason why I recommend Rob's stuff is because it doesn't cost very much. And as you can see in here, he's got this for like every single race that is in the game, and it's all there. And for a couple of bucks, it's worth it, I think, to save time. However, if you want to do it yourself, if you don't want to spend the money, you can take our coding class, which we cover a lot of this syntax, and we've got lists and charts of all of this stuff, and go through it and learn this really well. And then not only can you code these racial abilities and things like that, you can code all of the different stuff that Fantasy Grounds can do, and you can really leverage the power of the automation that this software allows. However, when you're first getting started, I find these kinds of things extremely handy. So now I've got this in here twice, so I only need it in here once. I'm just going to go ahead and delete one, just delete this one. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. And I've got my Dwarven Resilience in here. Now, what this does, right, is it adds this effect. And if I minimize this and I change this back to actions, and I click this button, assuming that this character has been added to the combat tracker, which I'm about to do on the DM side of things so that it will work correctly. Give me one quick second while I organize this on the other screen. So now that I've got that organized, I can click this. Well, first I should show you the combat tracker, perhaps. You can see, this button up here, these two cross swords, that's the combat tracker. And we'll get into that a lot more in the Combat 101 class. But unless you're added to the combat tracker, a lot of these effects won't work, so it's kind of hard to test. But I've done that now, and so he's in here. And when I add this Dwarven Resilience, I click on it, you can see this effect is applied to him. And whenever he takes damage now from poison, that will be automatically halved. So, those are the kinds of things that effects can do in Fantasy Grounds, and it's really powerful for that. So another thing that we're going to want to do is add the effects for some of the common potions, or at least one of the common potions. So I'm going to click Stop Editing List here, and come over to the inventory. And now in the inventory over here, from the DM screen, I added a potion of healing. And if you click on this link, it opens it up, and it tells you what the potion of healing will do. Basically, it heals you for 2d4 plus 2 hit points. So I'm just going to move this over here so that information is available. And I don't think we need the combat tracker right now, so maybe I'll just move it up here. And then come over to the Actions tab and create another group, or another heading, another group, and call it, it should be a power, and call it potions. And then when I click over here, it moves because it's alphabetical, and it comes down here, and I'm going to call it Potion of Healing. Now, if you look over here, the Potion of Healing gives you, like I said, 2d4 plus 2 hit points of healing. So you don't need to keep editing the list for this part, so I tend to turn that off. And then in here, for the Potion of Healing, I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click Add Action. and then I'm going to click Add Heal. So then you get this, your heal button, and then this information is blank. So in order to populate that, we click on that magnifying glass again, and similar to the way that weapons work, it will target whoever you target with this heal, and it will heal hit points because you can, have different, heal strength points and things like that. And click Add Item, and it is 2d4. Now this time, you drag your first, d4 over here like before, you get 1, and then you just drag another one of the same one and drop it down there again, and you get 2 of them. Now there's no stat involved because it's a potion, but it does give you a bonus of +2. So you just click on that, and you can just hit 2. So now you see it says 2d4 +2, and then all you have to do is close this out, and you've got your potion of healing in here that heals for 2d4 +2 damage. And if you come over here and change this back to actions, you've got a potion of healing that will heal whoever you target this with for 2d4 +2. However, once you use this potion won't disappear. So a good way of, for example, if you're out of them, if you've used one of them, a good way of keeping this actions tab clean is to go ahead and click on that, and it will change it. It will darken it out, and it will just hide whatever is in there. Again, like with spells, I didn't go through and add everything in there, so that keeping it in combat, keeps it clean or whatever. But for example, if you had it in here in your standard mode and you had all the spells in there, you didn't need to just want to look at it. You could do that with all of these things and just keep it really clean, and then only open up the ones you want to look at when you want to look at them. So there are a lot of different ways of organizing this. Whatever way works for you best is fine. So at this point, this character is basically done. Depending on how you want to handle this stuff, you can do it in different ways. So now what I would like to do is go ahead and show you how to bump this character up in levels. Because it's an important part of characters. It's not so much character creation, but it is a huge part of D&D and a lot of other games is leveling up. So the way that you do this is not to just come in here and add XP or raise your total level to 2 or change this to 2 or anything like that. The proper way of leveling up using a 5e rule set is to choose the class that you want to level up to, because depending on whether you're multi-classing or whatever, the software might not know. So for example, if you wanted to be cleric level 1 and then take another level of druid or fighter, you could totally do that, obviously. But this guy is going to become a level 2 cleric by just dragging that link over and dropping it again, just like you did when you became a level 1 cleric. And now the level 2 features, Channel Divinity and Channel Divinity Preserve Life, were added to Nori because he became, you get those abilities at level 2. And then I'm going to do it one more time and drag it on there and turn him into a level 3 cleric. So now if you come into abilities, you see that he's got these Channel Divinity abilities in here. Channel Divinity Turn Undead, for his basic ability, and his Channel Divinity Preserve Life, because he is a life cleric. So once that has been put into your features on your abilities tab, though, we're going to want to reflect that in your actions. This is another one of those places where Rob has come up with some really good pre-coded stuff. This is something that you can do manually, of course, as I keep saying. But if you come in here and you've got his class features effects coding loaded up in your modules like I have here, you can go ahead and click that and click on spells, and it, just like before, and now you get classes instead of races, and just scroll down to your cleric, and you've got your Channel Divinity Turn Undead, which and Channel Divinity Preserve Life. Now the way that I like to do this is click your editing list button again, add a new power just like before, call this one class abilities, and then just click anywhere else so that it creates this new section. And in here, you're going to definitely want to come in here and again change the ability to be function based on wisdom. And then because we're using his stuff, and a lot of the guys at Fantasy Grounds College use this. You can just grab that turn undead and drop it in here, and it adds that, and then preserve life and drag it in here and drop it, and then just go ahead and delete that first one because you don't really need it anymore. Now this stuff is it's just in here. Now preserve life and turn undead, they work in kind of weird ways that Fantasy Grounds has a bit of a hard time automating right now. So also I don't like that he has this. You don't really need all that. Yeah, you can just delete that, make that maybe a little bit. Make this just have it say turn undead and preserve life. You don't really need the channel divinity bit in there so much, I don't think. Just keep it shorter. And if you come over here and make it into actions, so now you've got this, oop, that's not correct. You've got this, open that up. Oh, I wonder why I did that. So yeah, you want to open this up. You want to make sure this says wisdom underneath the save, and that to make sure that this wisdom save says DC 13, or else it won't be working correctly. And then preserve life has to do, the number of hit points you get is based on your cleric level times 5. So, he's got that, set up in here pretty well. And it just generally works. But again, all of this stuff, you can go in and you can learn how to do the coding yourself. But again, that is beyond the scope of this tutorial. And then, you come down here and since you've leveled up, you get to choose a whole bunch of new spells and things like that, which, you can do on your own and choose, what you want to have. So right now, this character is done. The only thing that we need to do is give him a picture, because we're looking at this big brown square the whole time. It's been really boring. So what you want to do is you want to click on this, and it opens up these portraits that are available. I've got some stuff in here that I pulled off the internet and stuff that you probably won't have available. If you're just using the demo, you'll only have the examples and the fantasy portraits available, which are not great. The examples are, slightly better or whatever. And if you have anything purchased from Wizards, you'll get some other ones. This guy's a dwarf, so you can come in here and choose like dwarven pictures and things like that. And these little bags will be there when you open up to the first time. However, these other pictures I have in here, the way I got those in there is by clicking this little button that says folder. If you click that, you can't see it in this tutorial because it's opening up in a different window, but it opens up this the folder that those pictures come from, and any picture you drop in there will then be represented in here, and it'll show up in here. So I don't have any really good dwarven pictures available right now at the tip of my fingers. So I'm just going to come in here and choose the D&D 5e dwarf for this guy, and I mean this guy looks good. And then now he's got a picture, and so we've got Nori, the Dwarven Cleric, done. The only thing that I haven't talked about is his hit points. As I leveled him up to level 3, it automatically added his max hit points. It gave him the D8 at a full D8, and then in half that each level beyond that, with his Constitution bonus, which is +2, added to each of those levels. And now he's a 3 hit die guy, and he can use these hit dice for healing and things like that. So there it is. There's our Dwarven Cleric, just created to start. There's a couple other little things that we can add to to tweak him out a little bit better, to automate more and more. Basically, Fantasy Grounds has so much stuff, so much automation built in that you can always tweak it. You can always change things around a little bit to customize it the way you want it to work. One of the great things about this program is that there's usually like 3 or 4 different ways to get the same thing done. So however you like to do it, you know, you can usually find a way to make it work that way. But as far as, you know, starting out a character and getting something created like right off the bat, you know, this is the basic methodology that we suggest at Fantasy Grounds College. After this tutorial, we will be working on bringing you the Combat 101 tutorial. We'll probably find a couple of students willing to hop in and do it with us live, so you can see that stuff happen in real time. And they very well may come back through and create new tutorials with different classes and different races. Obviously, every combination isn't something that's feasible because Dungeons and Dragons and all the other rule sets just have, you know, so many potential, you know, characters that can be created. But we would at least like to cover, you know, each class and probably each race one time, so you can see a little bit of the differences in how those things work. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, and from everyone at FGC, you know, thank you for watching. And thanks for putting up with my rambling, you know, and good luck, and have fun in D&D and Fantasy Grounds, and you know, let us know what you think. You know, you can come to our Discord server, which we will put a link into the you know, down below somewhere, I believe, and our website. For more information on how to contact us and get information on how to, you know, learn Fantasy Grounds and learn D&D and, you know, all the other rule sets that we cover. So thank you very much.